My name's Catherine Taboni and I work for CQU Ag Education Team, and we're one of the facilitators of the state government funded Gateway to Industries program. I've got Jana online as well, so if you've got any tech issues, just pop them in the chat and Jana can help you as well. So as I said, CQU facilitate the state government funded program with AgriFutures Australia, the QATA, so Queensland Agricultural Teachers Association, and AgForce Schools to Industry Partnership Program. It's a 3-year program and we're into our 2nd year. And the program's split into 2 different streams. So stream 1 is where we work intensively with 15 different schools and to assist them in embedding ag into their curriculum and developing industry partnerships. And stream 2 is where we work with a wider scope of schools, and and it includes things like this webinar series, teachers' professional development, and also incursions with schools. So look out on our socials, on our Facebook page for some opportunities around the stream 2. As a part of the Ask Our Expert, we've got 4 webinars this year, and we've had 2 already. So we've had all things poultry in your school farm and how to integrate ag into your school farm. And this is our 3rd, which is about aquatic systems, and our final one is about developing and maintaining industry connections. And as I said, all of these are available on our website. So this year for our webinar series, what we decided to do is to add a Q&A component to the webinar. So what we'll do is have 2 presentations from our expert panelists, and then we'll have a live Q&A at the end. So you get to have an opportunity to ask our experts any questions that you have about your school, particular for your ag setup. So today in our How to Start Aquatic Systems at Your Schools, we'll be looking at current research and some practical examples. We'll discover some school-friendly trials and activities, and we'll learn from the experts around what works and what doesn't work. And as I said, we've got a live Q&A at the end. So if you've got any questions as the experts are talking, just pop them into the chat and we can facilitate that after their presentations. So we're very lucky to have 2 panelists today. Our first panelist will be Matt Jones, and he's the Extension Officer for Fisheries Research and Development Corporation from Victoria. And then we've got Wendy Ray, who is one of our teachers that we worked with last year for the Gateway Stream 1 from Dalby State High School, and she'll talk about her, what sort of setup she's got at her school too. Okay, so I might stop sharing now and we'll jump over to Matt if you want to start sharing your screen.
And bear with me, team. Let me just fire this up. Make sure it all works. We did a bit of a test run, so we'll see whilst we're in production if it goes. Can everyone see that?
Perfect, yep.
Yeah, awesome. And everyone can hear me? So my name, I'm Matt Jones. I work for the Fisheries Research Development Corporation, FRDC. My background is a long time in Tasmania. So I did a PhD a long time ago. Don't ask me what the topic was, because I can't remember what it was, in aquaculture back in the day in Launceston, and then spent roughly a bit of time in the salmon industry, and then worked for a training company down in Tassie for quite some time. And part of the role with that training company was to help set up a couple of trade training schools down in Tasmania that did salmon farming or hatchery work, and oyster farm up the north as well. So got a bit of experience with the school side of things, particularly when it comes to aquaculture. You just press the right button now. Tell me if this progresses. Yep, good to go. I don't want to harp too much on about the aquaculture industry in general. I'm a firm believer when it comes to aquaculture in schools that it's a really good proxy for a whole bunch of other things, not necessarily just careers in aquaculture. But before we get started, I might as well quickly mention it. So aquaculture itself, it's a big industry, getting bigger. It's about 2.3 billion. It's increasing every year. There's somewhere between 8,000 and 15,000 regional jobs associated with it. We don't know the real number. It's hard to gauge sometimes because census data isn't entirely accurate in this space. The big players in aquaculture at the moment, everyone knows the salmon industry down in Tassie. It represents about 45 to 55% of the total value of aquaculture in the country at the moment. And then moving around the country itself, Victoria grows mussels, South Australia does a lot of tuna, Lots of really good oysters. I'm sure everyone loves your Coffin Bay oysters if you're an oyster fan. Western Australia is doing Cone Bay up the top with Barra at the moment offshore. There's a bit of oysters and pearl oysters as well. Northern Territory is famous for its barramundi farms, Humpty Doo, great sustainable aquaculture production. Down up in Queensland, you've got prawn farmers, you've got barra farmers, you've got red claw farmers as well. New South Wales is pretty well known for its oysters. The Sydney Rocks is a very good oyster. For those that love your oysters, there's also some yabby and silver perch stuff, and the list goes on. Basically, it's a pretty big industry. When it comes to getting animals in the classroom, though, and it's not going to be a very academic talk, but there is a fair bit of evidence to suggest that using live animals, and you guys know this, your teachers, using live animals in classrooms has significantly better outcomes when it comes to learning. There was a study done in 2012. It was a meta study, looked at about 400 different papers. And the main conclusion was that use of live animals in lessons significantly increased middle school student knowledge gains against things like simulations or just simply talking about it or to a video. So there's some real value in having animals in the classroom. And when it comes to the easiest animals to start with, more often not, the aquatic organisms are pretty much some of the easiest ones to work with. Before I get into it, though, quick shout out to Seafood Careers Australia. So this is a website we put together a little while ago for teachers out there wondering where students may end up when they go down this path, working with aquaculture or fishing or any of that sort of space. We've got a website. It's called Seafood Careers Australia. You can jump on it. It'll give you a big list of career options when it comes to working in the seafood industry. It's not just fishermen. It's not just aquaculturists, although they're very worthy careers. There's all the science that underpins it, and there's also the auxiliary industries that sort of support those industries as well. So well worth a browse if you're wondering from the student's perspective what their options are when it comes to getting into the seafood and aquaculture space, fishing aquaculture space. When we talk about aquaculture in schools, there's a fairly large breadth of options when it comes to aquaculture. And it spans, aquariums all the way up to what I call basically semi-commercial to commercial systems. If there's anyone on the call, by the way, that these systems belong to, please put your hand up at some point, just in case I completely misrepresent your own systems. But just to give you a couple of quick examples, Ebre High School, Agricultural College, in SA, they're involved with breeding endangered fish. I'll go into that a little bit more in a second. You got the Rockhampton State High School, which, working with the local council, put in what I would call a commercial production system for barramundi. It's about as high tech as you're ever going to get. Then you've also got the Belgian Gardens State School, which is a school that is breeding clownfish, which for those who've ever owned a clownfish, they're really cool. Like, they were the first fish I ever bred as a uni student. They're really fun to do, and they work fantastic. When it comes to picking your whatever you want to end sound in, these tiers don't exist. They aren't real tiers, by the way, so don't Google tier 2 aquaculture systems in schools. This is something that's just made up for the sake of presenting it, but they get to the point. You kind of can enter in at a whole bunch of different levels. So tier 1, you could talk about your classroom aquariums. They're pretty basic. Glass aquarium. Hopefully everyone's kept a goldfish at some point. They can live in the science classroom. Daily care is pretty simple. Water testing's there. There's lots of observation stuff you can do. It's small scale. If it fails, it's easy to get rid of and hide. Doesn't cost a lot, although if there's anyone here that's involved with aquariums, they can get up to $15,000 for aquariums if you get right into it. Then you got into your tier 2 stuff, and that's your aquaponics and your smaller scale fish stuff. I don't have a lot of experience with aquaponics, although it seems to be the flavour of the month with a lot of schools that I speak to. There are a number of off-the-shelf systems that you can now buy when it comes to aquaponics, and that mix of plant growing and growing fish is quite of interest to a number of school systems. Then you got your tier 3 stuff, which is your production systems, and these are sort of industry standard facilities. They're often installed by commercial system operators, and they're based off or are run by commercial operators. These can range in price from 15K and you're up to 2 million, depending on the system that you actually want to buy. And as you kind of go down that list in terms of increasing the tiers, you're going increasing complexity, and then complexity has an added cost of time. So it's something to really consider when you think about building these aquaculture systems in, and we'll go into some of these in a bit more detail now. When it comes to aquariums in schools, I'll flick straight to a really good example. So these guys, Adam, up in the Northern Territory, CSIRO, they're trying to get aquariums into schools. They put a 182 litre tank up in to Dripstone Middle School. It's part of the CSIRO program. They're offering a whole bunch of support with it. And the idea being, it's a way to get science into the classrooms. It's a simple aquarium system. They've stuck rainbow fish, I think, and blue eyes, which are 2 Australian native species. They're breeding them in the classrooms. Those fish can then be sold to aquarium shops or released back into the wild, depending on where you pull them from. We'll talk about that in just a second. But more importantly, they're really heavily integrated into the classroom teaching. So it's not just about collecting fish or keeping fish. It's about the science that underpins keeping those aquariums alive and all the STEM courses that can be built off the side of that. Belgian Garden State School is another good example. These guys have been breeding clownfish for quite some time. I think they recently got another grant from the federal government to expand this system. They're growing clownfish. They're pretty straightforward. You just need a bunch of tanks. They look like 3 foot by 2 foot tanks. In a dedicated room, there's a huge amount of science that's attached to it. They sell the baby clownfish to the local aquarium shops, and they get credit for them to spend that money back on, so they can keep buying stuff to keep going with their aquariums. It's a primary school. It's built into their STEM system. It's a hands-on learning for a lot of these students, and it keeps them really engaged in it. And then you got these guys. It's not just Herbrae. There's a collection of a number of schools in South Australia. There's a fish, and they call it the zombie fish because the media loves a good zombie story. And it's called the purple spotted gudgeon. The purple spotted gudgeon was thought extinct in Victoria. It turns out it wasn't. There was a couple little puddles off the northwest of Victoria that they found it in. They grabbed this fish and they started to breed it up and re-release it back into the river systems. Now, there's a bunch of schools now that have hooked up with a lot of the local conservation groups and non-government organisations that are doing this sort of work, where the schools themselves are actually breeding these fish. And once they've bred those fish, they then get released into the wild, and then they add more fish into the population, and the story keeps looping in. I'm a massive fan of that. I'll come back to this point in just a second. I've skipped over. I'm a massive fan of that concept of doing that integration between aquaculture and conservation. For those that are in rural schools or in rural areas, we know some of our river systems, some of them, not all of them, are under a fair bit of pressure at the moment. You got a whole bunch of issues with urban runoff, plastics in the water system, overuse, and we've got feral species and carp. So having students that get an opportunity to then interact with their local river systems really builds a bit of a connection back to their own local area. The cool other thing you can do with a lot of this aquarium stuff, does anyone remember Punnett squares? And my memory of Punnett squares when it comes to teaching genetics in high school, or learning it, I think it was peas or something like that. Curly pea, I cannot remember. Anyway, it's something to do with plants. But you can teach, there's a whole wide breadth of stuff you can use around aquariums to teach good science and observable science in the classroom. For this particular case, you get a bunch of guppies. Guppies have both a recessive and a dominant gene that will determine the colour of the tail. You can punch out a Punnett square experiment where you stick some orange guppies and some blue guppies into an aquarium, and you look at the proportion of the babies that have orange or blue tails. And it's practical learning, and it works really well, and it's super easy to do. There is a problem with this, and the only issue with it is if plants, you can just turf them back in and recycle them back into your dirt. At the end of the day, now you've got a lot of guppies you need to deal with. So it is something to consider if you're going down this path. Not many people, but it is something to consider because you're actually now dealing with a lot of live animals that you can't eat. Then you're moving into the next tier, which is your aquaponic systems, and that's your fish and your plants. The concept behind this is that you've got plants growing in like a hydroponic system. You've also got fish. The fish are providing the nutrients in the form of usually ammonia. The ammonia is converted to nitrates through usually biofilters, although plants can directly use ammonia as well. The plants grow, You can harvest them, usually lettuce or some herbs, and the fish grow side by side. It's a way to kind of teach that integration between plant growth and vegetable growth and plant and fish themselves. I've had a little bit to do with this, and there's probably some teachers on this call that have had a bit more experience than I have. My experience with it is you end up doing two things really poorly, and it's very difficult. But I'm terrible at growing plants, so I think that's more on me. I kept very good fish and terrible plants. But there are those out there that are probably a bit more successful for it. It's a great system to integrate though for schools, and there are some off-the-shelf products that can make your life a little bit easier if you're going down that avenue. And then you've got your commercial systems. There's a bit of a video, and hopefully there's no sound playing in the background, so just mute that, but I'll talk over it. This is Rockhampton High School. They got a grant from the local council, or state high school. I think there's about a $15,000 cost in terms of operating. This is a full commercial aquaculture system. We're talking poly tanks, recirc systems, drum filters, UV filters, you name it, it's basically there. I can't think of a gizmo that we would use in normal aquaculture systems that these guys haven't got. It's state of the art, built by Fresh by Design. They've integrated pretty well with the local barramundi dams. So they're basically releasing the fish that they grow in these state schools into the local dams that they can be caught by recreational fishers. So there's a market at the end of the day that these animals then are used. Great system, great idea. Total benefit being that you're not having to deal with the fish at the end of it as well. They're basically being released back into the wild. We'll come back to species selection in just a second, but this only works if you pick the local natives that are local to your particular area. Great system though, not cheap. I don't know how much it costs them. You could probably look it up. I'm sure it's available, but this sort of stuff it's a huge capital outlay, and it has ongoing costs that are also proportional to the size and the cost of the original farm itself. This is all publicly available. Cool looking barra for it. So when you're talking about working through what aquaculture systems you want, it's probably worth starting with a learning purpose. So, do you want to look at plant nutrient cycling and sustainability? Then an aquaponic system might be your go. Are you looking at creating vet pathways and career-ready skills for your students? Maybe then, working with a trade training center or having a commercial partner that has a commercial size farm might be the way to go. Are you interested in STEM? Like, is this a science teacher that's really interested in just having an aquarium in the classroom? A good example of that is New South Wales Yabby iSTEM unit. So you can go on the web, you can have a bit of a look at it. They produced a really cool unit for teachers where you've got yabbies in an IBC, which is just a 1,000-litre tank, not used for cold and chemicals. But then there's all this cool stuff you can put on the outside of it. So you could build Raspberry Pi controlled climate control systems or Arduino-based water control systems. So there's all this stuff that builds onto it, and those systems are already in place, and the teaching methods are already ready to go. So it can be as high tech as you want. And you can see that it doesn't always have to be a giant farm dam. It can be something relatively small that sits off the side of the school itself. In terms of the species themselves, so match the species to the systems and the approvals you can get. There's a bit of a, easy to hard in terms of the type of species you're looking at. Goldfish, hardy, forgive beginner mistakes, they're pretty straightforward, all the way up to your barramundi and your Murray cod, which are a bit more advanced in a commercial thing. The key thing to picking any of these is to have an end of life concept around it at the very start. So if you're talking your ornamental fish, you're talking your goldfish and your betters and your tropicals and your native rainbows, you're producing an animal, particularly if it's a breeding program, you're producing an animal that you have to be able to release, and you can't just chuck them out in the waterways as much as you would like to. Even native fish, there are rules around putting animals back into the water, particularly around biosecurity reasons. So have a bit of a think about it at the very start of your program of what you're going to do with those animals at the very end. It might be consuming them, it might be giving them to the public, it might be selling them, but you need to have those pathways in place right at the very start. There are some species that are easy to keep that are natives. Silver perch and jade perch are quite hardy. They grow really well in dams as well. Barramundi are pretty tough. It's hard to kill a barra. For the most part, unless you get them too cold. And there's a whole bunch of aquarium species that are pretty straightforward as well. When you're talking about stocking and picking the animals, there's a whole bunch of things you can go through. I'm not going to go through each individual one. If I was to pick three that would I'd start with, it's who's caring for the animals on the weekend. I know if you're all school teachers at the end of the day, and the last thing you want to be doing is showing up at school on a weekend. And it's not just the weekends, it's the holidays as well. So when you're timing your production systems, what's the plan for Christmas? So I guarantee if you're trying to keep them alive over Christmas, that is the day that you'll get an alarm that you have to rock up to your school and deal with a problem on it. So have a bit of a plan around that. What's the plan if the equipment fails? So built-in redundancy. I can't tell you the number of times that a single pump has failed and you just can't find a replacement for it. And it'll kill fish very, very quickly. It's not like livestock at the end of the day where you get a bit of time, you know, animals can still wander around an unfenced paddock. But if a pump fails in a research system, in the aquaculture system, you will lose your fish and you'll lose them pretty quickly. So you do need to have that redundancy built in. And I mentioned a couple of times, but what happens to the animals at the end of the program? You know, you're giving them away. Are you having a big barbecue? Are you smoking them? Are you selling them to your local commercial producer? You know, what are your options around that? I'll give you a couple of quick examples, or a very good one that was solved for the oyster program. So I was involved with, better pictures, there isn't. Building we ran a Cert 3 oyster program, sorry, Cert 2 oyster program up in Tasmania with a high school up in Smithton. For those that aren't familiar with the system, it's just up in the northwest in Smithton. This school was growing juvenile oysters up to a certain size and then selling those oysters to the local oyster farmers who would then on-grow those oysters and sell them to market. And it was a great system because they didn't have to hold those oysters for the duration, didn't have to worry about marketing, and there was a market at the end of it. But that partnership was built first before they put the systems in. They thought about it before they actually went down that path. This is all pretty obvious stuff, but at the end of the day, location, and I don't mean location of, you know, physically where the school is, but where you actually put the animals themselves is really important. Water's heavy. The last thing you want to be doing is moving water around with great difficulty, and you have to think about what you're going to do with the water after you've used it. And there's all sorts of rules associated with that. There's all sorts of things like access and biosecurity and aeration and light. How are you going to you got to make sure that there's no light building into the tanks themselves, right down to, you know, where do you store the food? For those that work in rural areas, fish food is like a magnet for rats. So you do need secure storage. And sometimes if you live in somewhere that's tropical, you need to make sure the food is kept cool. So all these sort of things play in when you're sort of building out these systems. There's a ton of routine in aquaculture, and this is what it's about, and it'll teach you routine, but it's a great one for kids to learn. There's all sorts of things you can do for daily checks, you know, animal behavior, feeding response, aeration, temperature, water clearance, a whole bunch of other things. But a lot of this stuff needs to be planned beforehand. You need to be thinking about all your backups, who's going to be doing it, who's available, and who's got the skill set to be there for those backup systems. The three non-negotiables I've got when it comes to getting aquaculture up in schools, one's risk management. So really think about, you know, your slips, trips and falls. The aquaculture industry, also the seafood industry more broadly, has some of the highest rates of accidents in Australia, and that's through no fault of their own, other than it can be quite a dangerous workplace to be in. And that does translate to schools as well. So you need to make sure that you have everything down to a T when it comes to safety. Water and electricity does not mix. There's a lot of electricity around this water system, so you need to know that. Animal ethics is dear to me. I'm a huge believer that fish are sentient animals, right down to your crustaceans as well, and there's a lot of evidence that suggests that as well. So you need to make sure that at the end of the day, the welfare of the animals has been looked after. Certain schools, depending on where you are around the country, have certain rules around the ethics as well. And then biosecurity. So the aquaculture industry in Australia is starting to build, and the last thing we really need is for a school to be a source of a disease outbreak. So you need to make sure that the biosecurity around your schools is locked down. And there's a whole bunch of modules you can do that with in terms of teaching disease when it comes to students for it as well. And that's pretty much me, without being able to give specific examples outside of that. Yeah. Any questions, or we'll move on to the next?
We might just hang, if you've got any questions, just drop them in the chat now, and we might jump straight into Wendy's presentation, and then we can go back to some of the questions, if you don't mind, Matt. Thank you very much for that. That was a lot of information, but I'm really pleased to see the references there as well, so the teachers can go back to that as well. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thanks, Matt. Am I right to share, Catherine? Oh, can anyone hear me?
Yep,
We sure
perfect.
can.
Oh, great. And can you see me now, my PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yep, we
perfect.
can see
Okay,
you and your
excellent.
PowerPoint. Thank you, Wendy.
Great. Hi, guys. How are you all? Thank you for having me. My name is Wendy Ray. I am from Dalby State High School. We're about 100 k's west of Toowoomba. We're a very large cattle feedlotting area and cropping and cotton. It's very flat here. We are just ideal for a mixed farm area. I have 250 students from grade 8 to 12 that choose ag as an elective, and then 200 students that are going through in grade 7 as they do it per term. So that's us. We chose to do aquaculture and aquaponics in Dalby because it's just not here. We have 20 different units that we run in agriculture now. So we really needed to have just a couple of extras. We removed like a unit on sustainability and put sustainability in every unit. So we needed something more. So we looked at putting hydroponics in grade 8, aquaculture in grade 9, and then aquaponics in grade 10. So we've built our system sequentially. So what I'll be talking to you about is aquaculture setup and basically designing it for where you want the program to be in a couple of years. I'm saying 5 years here. We didn't design it that far ahead, but we did design it for about 2 to 3 years of where we want to see ourselves. And then just a quick look at our aquaculture unit and the practice that we do and the tips and what not to do from us putting it in. We put it in last year for the first time. I spoke to Matt before I did it, and he gave me lots of great ideas because we put in red claw crayfish. And the reason we did that is because, of course, non-vertebrates and just for how interactive they are. And I'll talk to you about that in a minute. So we have set up a full aquaponics system, which is that integrated production of food with your fish culture and your plant production. This is what our system is like in 2025. We have set up a bell siphon system where we have our fish tank, which is running our red claw. We have a pump currently that's sat up against the wall, but it can sit in the middle because it sends out aeration in the middle. It's got a fountain. It then sinks in and drops into our grow beds. There's then a bell siphon at the top of the grow bed. And I'll show you all that, which when it fills, it will break that siphon and it sends a huge whoosh of water back into the pond, which the crayfish love. They get in there right under the whoosh and they can't wait for the whoosh, and you'll see 30 of them sitting there waiting for the big whoosh, and then they'll all disperse again till they know that the whoosh is coming again. So they really love it. This is not the same as a commercial RAS system. Okay, so the RAS system that you would have seen that Rocky is running for their barra, they've got a great system there, but they've got a lot higher flow rate than us. They would have a better capacity to accumulate the solids and to make sure the solids are okay, and for any catastrophic fails. So if our bell siphon fails, what happens? Does it just overload the grow bed? Ours doesn't, but I'll show you how we made it not. So this is our system. It doesn't look pretty, guys, at all. Like there's no prettiness to this currently. I've said it to others, and I've said it to Alan, and I'm pretty sure I've got an email to send back to you, Alan, and a visit. But you can set it up with as little as one pod, an ICB, and have the base of the pod with your red claw and cut it in half, and the top of your pod is the grow bed. And as long as you've got a system that recirculates that, you're good to go. We didn't. We chose to do it in a couple of different ways because our classes have got 28 in them. We really needed our students to have great access at all times when they're doing a lesson. So we chose 2 by 600 litre just ag troughs, just cattle troughs, because they're low to the ground and it allows our students really easy access. So we have 2 on either side of grow beds. So we have, as you can see, their grow beds down here. They're just sitting on top of their base. And that's what the grow beds look like in our first year. If you look at the water, you can see the black pipe coming up to the tap there, and we turn that tap right down so that when it is flowing into your grow bed and your medium there, it is quite a minimal amount that's going in to allow it to fill up slowly, because your roots have to have that oxygen. They have to not be wet for a certain amount of time for your plants to still grow well. Once that water fully fills the top, the siphon will break. This is the siphon over here, just this little circular part. When that breaks, the whoosh comes out of that white pipe down there, as you can see on the left. And yeah, the cray will always get in there. They love the whoosh. So that is our 2025 system. It'll look different in 2026, but we have 2 of these 600 litre troughs, and they don't climb out, by the way. We don't fill it anywhere near enough that they can. They have made a bit of a teepee trying to get up, especially out of these pipes, but they haven't quite got there yet. So last year's group weren't that clever. What is really important for us to have 2 separate ponds? Why did we want to have 2 separate ponds plus a nursery? Okay, so we've got a separate nursery off to the side, or a hatchery. Having these 2 separate ponds allows us to run multiple stations when we've got a class of 28. You don't want kids bored. So both ponds are used for the aquaculture in grade 9 in the given lesson, and I'll show you what they do as I talk to you about the practicals. It also allows us to do feed trials. We can do a gender-based feed trial, having the 2 ponds, which we couldn't do if we've got 1. It's a lot more hassle. It allows us also to look at waste trials for different species. So we plan on looking at, in this year, crayfish versus silver perch, still using those 2 troughs, but we want to look at, in the year 10s, how many do we need for stocking density to get the same amount of waste as such to grow our plants? Or, you know, if we have the waste there for correct stocking density, which plants will grow better? So it's any of these scientific trials that you can possibly think of. It means that we can also have up to 4 grow beds for our plants off the 2 ponds, because the pumps that we got are big pumps. They go off both sides to go into 2 fully separate grow beds. So you can have 4 grow beds running out of 2 ponds. That allows us then to do different plant trials for our senior students, because we are using this aqua system from grade 9 through to grade 12. Okay, we have all different units occurring with it. And it allows us for 2 separate groups to run design solution trials as well. So because we're running junior ag through design and tech syllabus, and of course we're looking at design solutions, 2 different groups can be running. So the grade 10s, they can split into 2 groups and run 2 different design solutions to fix a problem. So that's why we went with 2 separate ponds. You could use 2 separate pods. You just want to have 2 so you can be doing alternate trials. This is our unit on aquaculture. Now, we brought in the red claw. That's perfect. We use that for our practicals. But we have a full year 9 unit for a term where we look at the history and introduction of aquaculture in Australia, why we farm fish in Australia, what those major aquaculture species are, and the different aquaculture systems in Australia, the welfare, ethics and sustainability, feeding and feed conversion rates, water quality, which then becomes very big in our pracs, our husbandry, our biosecurity and disease, our stocking density and our carrying capacity, tech and automation, and then where we get to with AI tech in aquaculture. So we've built a full theory-based and practical-based unit around this when we started. Our 2025 aquaculture assessment was an exam. We literally were putting our system in 2 days before we started term last year. So we were then, you know, on the go, and we didn't get to run a design tech over the term assessment. So we ran an exam based on scenarios of aquaculture with design solutions and tech. So it still met our syllabus requirements, but it wasn't what we were looking for. This year, we'll be looking at different things for different grades. We'll be looking at marketing and ethical branding, or a sustainability audit report, or a design improvement challenge. This will be for our grade 10s and our grade 9s. So all sorts of different assessment capabilities and ideas can come out of your aquaculture. These are our pracs. So when we first got them, and I just went down to Bow Desert and picked ours up. I do have another man now that I'll be getting ours from this year because he delivers up to Toowoomba, so that'll be helpful. I overstocked, in which case they're cannibalistic little things and they eat each other. So don't overstock. I'll talk to you a bit more about that. Do not overstock it. I overstocked because by week 3, I wanted to be doing the dissection. And I thought, well, I'm going to need 40 for a dissection. I may as well just buy the whole 100 now. Not a good idea. Anyway, I learnt that pretty quickly. Not for red claw. You don't need a license or registration for red claw. Yeah. Okay. So our students sign a contract that they will apply low stress handling techniques for the red claw because they are so interactive and brilliant to work with. So they look at how to handle red claw. It's the first thing they're taught. And then they look at their behaviour and they build the hides for the student, for the ponds. And they found out pretty quickly not to build the hides high because a red claw won't go high. They need to be on the ground. But they built several different types of hides and looked to see which one was better for the red claw. They learn about sexing the red claw because it's not just that female, one has the red claw and one doesn't. There's underneath, there's different parts that are visible that you can see which are female or male. They dissect the red claw crayfish. And we put a lot of time and effort and money into our monitoring our water quality. So every week we would have multiple stations where we had 2 different groups. One group would be working on one pond to monitor the growth. And you can see there, see this little one with the red nail polish? The grade 10s went a bit overboard with him with the nail polish. But we couldn't work out any other way to be able to capture which one was which to monitor the growth. And so we literally made a colour code chart and we painted them just a tiny bit on the top of their carapace there, and we could then monitor their growth every week. So while half a class is monitoring growth there on one, the other half of the class is on the other tank doing the water quality. And we measure temperature because they're very fussy about their temperature. So you must make sure if you're in a cold climate, you've got heaters in there. We check pH. We check their dissolved oxygen using dissolved oxygen probes. We look at dissolved solids, and then we look at the ammonia and the nitrate tests as well. So they will each work through their stations because they all have to get their right tests done. So whoever's on water quality, I've got it all set up and they move from station to station, go over to their pond, measure it, record it and see where we're going. And we will look at what's happening week after week and what they're seeing. The students really bought into that. They bought into both parts. I thought that they weren't going to with regard to the water quality. I thought, they're going to get a bit bored. They liked doing the water quality as well. So that was a big bonus for us. Always have your little nets because they do like that. We would weigh them over in a different area as well, just to keep them out of everybody's way and to make sure that we didn't drop any or have any run away. When we were ready to clean the water of the tank and do a recycle of our water, which we did twice per term, we ran our water off into our cotton. So we were very lucky. Matt was talking about making sure where you're sending off your water, where you're sending off all your components. We have a hoardy area that we just run it off into our cotton area, which doesn't get used. So they're our boys. They learn very quickly how to hold their red claw. And as you can see here, They do like being around the pump. That's the other thing they're drawn to, the pump. They quite like that. So for our Year 10 unit, as I said, we're doing this from a hydroponics, aquaculture, aquaponics sequence. Our Year 10 unit on aquaponics, of course, recaps aquaculture and the system design. It then looks at the biological engine of what we're doing, the nitrogen nutrient cycling, looks at our systems, processes, and performance. Okay, is our pump really picking up enough of the waste to create what we need for the plant development? We look and understand aquaponics in Australia, how it's working, the technology, the scale of it in the industry. And then we look at this, and under design and tech, you know, we need to introduce either Indigenous perspectives in grade 8. In grade 9 and 10, we've introduced Asian perspectives as well. So we look at aquaponics in Asia, we look at hydroponics in Asia, all of that because of the distance and the space. What innovation is there and what cultural drivers we do have. We then look at the future trends in global aquaponics and where is this moving towards now that we're looking at fished out areas and things like that. Getting started with our plants, what we didn't learn was really boost them up in a dedicated plant area, seedling area, before we put it into our water, before we put it into the aquaponics area. Make sure you've got a dedicated seedling area and you build them up enough, because they won't take if you put small seedlings straight in, we found anyway, straight into the clay ball area. I think you'll get this, so I won't go over it. It explains, do you want me to explain how a bell siphon works? Is anyone interested in that, or do you understand the concept? The bell siphon makes a vacuum while the pump fills the grow bed. It stops any water draining at that time, but as soon as the bed is full, it breaks the siphon and allows the water to drain back into your fish or your crays. So that way you get that big whoosh. It also aerates out your crayfish. I'm sure that's why they love it. They get this big hit of oxygen. So we pump that nutrient-rich water from the red claw tank into the inorganic hydroponic media, and they're clay balls. Don't go cheap on your media for your aquaponics. We got conned into going cheap. We got almost like crusher dust. Don't do it. Nothing will grow. Buy the expensive clay balls if you want your plants to live. The grow bed's filled with water, and the bacteria converts that ammonia to nitrites, then into nitrates, which are absorbed by the plants while the filling occurs, that flow, and then it's reoxygenated when it drains. So that's you get your whoosh. It's really good. We are looking at you doing quite a number of field trials with this because it's very flexible for our senior school as well. We use it for ag practices, and in time we'll use it for ag science as well. We can look at the effect of plant species on the nitrate uptake. We can look at the flow rate of the water versus the plant growth. Should we speed up our flow rate of water into the media, or should we slow it right down? The kids can do that and do a trial on that. And then looking at stocking density versus the water quality and the stability of it. So we're taking our aqua from as low as we can in grade 9 all the way up. And we've designed units around all of that. Tips of what not to do. Okay, the water levels. Now for your crayfish, if it gets too high, they will climb out. So don't do that. You only need as much water to the top of the bell. Okay, and in your pond, your crayfish is still underwater. That's all you need. It can be very low. It can be like this in your pond, and it just needs water then to the top, because as soon as it siphons, it'll go back into your pond. Water filter timing. Make sure you do have a tap so that you can turn down that water filter and the water filtering into the media so that it's very minimal. Don't overstock. They eat each other. So the next thing, what I'll do this year is I'll only buy proper stocking density for my area, but I'll head back down to Bow Desert the weekend before we're going to do the dissection, and grab more. Now, you have to learn how to euthanize these red claw ethically, and that is you don't just leave them out. You've got to be very careful with them. They when it gets cold, they curl their tails under and they go to sleep. So we looked at, dear Lord, Matt, tell me if I'm wrong, but we looked at putting them in the fridge slowly first, and their tails go under and they die very slowly. Please tell me that is right, Matt.
It's definitely a way to kill them. Yep.
Oh,
that
okay.
works.
That's what we were told was okay.
Yeah, it should be okay.
Yeah, because they just went slowly to sleep as it got colder. So that's what we're hoping, because we did get quite attached to our red claw. Because you do need them, dead to have your dissection happening. Have a hatchery ready. That was another thing. We didn't. And all of a sudden we've got mummies with eggs. And you can tell as soon as the eggs, because the mothers start to curl their tails around. And when you open their tails out, you'll see the 3 different levels of egg growth. So it's worth researching all of that. So have a hatchery ready. If you buy them as medium red claw at the beginning of term, you're going to have pregnant red claw by about week 8, potentially. That's what we did. So you have to have your breeding environment ready. And we got the medium for growth of plants. Yeah, don't go the cheap option. Buy the clay balls to make sure you get the most out of it. Okay. I would say buy the medium red claw versus buy fingerlings, because we do our whole thing as purpose driven. We don't keep them over Christmas. They're eaten, but that's right. Good. The teachers got to eat them. We put a lot of time and effort into them, so we ate them. Next year, like I said, this year we'll have red claw and silver perch, and then our silver perch will go into our den. So has anyone got any questions for me?
We've got a couple in the chat. If anybody else has got any questions, if you want to drop them in the chat, we've got about 10 minutes left to speak to the experts. So drop your questions into the chat. So we might start about the filter. Do you have a filter, or do you just rely on the plants for your setup, Wendy?
Oh, no, we rely on the plants. It does a beautiful job. It's fantastic. In that those clay balls, all the waste and everything that you're filtering through will be picked up by the clay balls, and it comes out very, very clean, the water. Yeah, excellent. It does a really good job.
Yeah. We had a previous question about what were the common mistakes made when establishing aquatic systems. You've given some of your tips, Wendy. Matt, did you have any other tips that you'd like to add around establishing aquatic systems and how teachers can avoid some of those common mistakes?
Yeah, honestly, probably the biggest one I see is just not having, it's people is probably the biggest mistake, and not, it probably sounds weird to say, but like not having another teacher that can actually run the systems is probably the biggest mistake I see over and over and over again. A lot of these systems seem are heavily reliant on a single teacher out of school that's very passionate about it and will drive these programs along. And that teacher will either leave or fall ill or have a different interest or move away or have a child or whatever it happens to be, very legitimate reasons. And then those systems then fall over. So my only recommendation to anyone going down this journey is to have bring another teacher along on the journey with you. So you've got redundancy in that system if someone wants to move on from it, because otherwise it's very hard to train someone up very quickly in this space.
Yeah, excellent.
And we did have that. We have like 5 ag teachers, and anything we bring in, we all learn, because you're true that it's happened. We create studs of animals, and then the teachers will move away and no one's there. So yeah, that's really important.
Contingency, yes. And how can schools manage water quality, and what are the key things teachers and students should monitor regularly in terms of water quality? I think you touched on some of those things, Wendy.
Yeah. So for us, for water quality, have I stopped sharing? Hang on, I'll stop sharing this. Sorry, my bad. Yes, definitely water quality. Your dissolved oxygen is important for red claw. They need that. Your dissolved solids, ammonia, nitrate. It's really just a matter of Googling red claw. There's so much research out there that explains what they like. and they have a very specific pH range that they like. And you just need to keep it's not that much different than working with a pool. You have to keep the water quality with what your red claw like. And also, of course, you're not putting chemicals in there that'll kill them. So you've got to be very careful if you're monitoring water quality and you need to change something. What are you using to do that?
Yeah. And Matt, did you have anything else around water quality and the management and some of the ideas around the tests, or is that all been sort of covered?
Yeah, no, you're spot on. Just match your animals with the intake water itself. Be very, very aware that town water's got a lot of chlorine in it, and that will kill your fish pretty quickly if you're just relying on it without a filter involved with it. Well, moving water is expensive, so and accessing water, clean water, can often be expensive as well. So sort of build that into your system designs. Reusing water is perfectly fine. You can. I sort of said it before, it's how long is a piece of rope effectively in terms of the water quality monitoring systems you got out there. You can go from simple color-coded test systems all the way up to digital systems that got a built-in redundancy and a ton of alarms built into it that'll text your phone the second the pH drops below 6.5. So it's up to the schools in terms of what you want to invest in, and more often than not, you can explore with the students themselves about what those test systems can look like.
Yeah. Excellent, thank you. And we've had a couple of questions about the IBCs, and we have had that raised with us with our team as well. Do you need food safe IBCs?
Well, they need to be cleaned out, and I mean, we didn't put our red claw, like I said, we put it in the bigger troughs, and I think it's worth spending a bit of money to get those bigger troughs because you've got bigger access for the kids. You've got up to 25 students there. They all need to have access. And those IBCs, they're not as big. They're just that square. You don't have as much, you can only put so many kids around one. So if you've got the chance, I would spend the money and get something with greater, width for your kids to be able to get in and around and have that access. As well as that, depends where you cut your IBC, but they can also be a bit, you've got to really work on the edges, which can be a bit jagged, and they're a bit tall for some of your grade 7s and things like that to be dipping into. And red claw don't need much water. So when you're dealing with fish, they need, you've got water, and they swim. But the red claw really don't swim. They walk around along the bottom and they're quite happy. They don't, swim up to the top or anything like that. I think the best type of aquatic system to work for schools that are just starting out is definitely a bell siphon system with, if you can, a better pond than an IBC if you've got the money. I think our 600 litre tank was about $600. Maybe.
And how many yabbies do you get in that, or red claw do you get in that?
They'll take 30 in each.
Yep.
30 medium sized ones in each, and quite happily without, killing each other off. But they're really good for interactivity. We will do fish this year, but I'm not looking forward to it as much. The kids just love to grab it, see how it's growing, check the weight, do all of that. And they're so interactive and they're hardy. They don't die just because you're picking them up. They don't die because you pulled them out of the water. Whereas fish, what are you going to do with them? I've got to, work out a way of weighing them and all those sorts of things, but they're not as interactive fish.
Yeah, and ethically as well, it's probably harder to handle the fish than it can be. Yeah.
Vertebrate in Queensland, vertebrate versus invertebrate for your EQ schools. That's the difference. Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of the systems, I see that you're in I think you're in with a like a shed, open shed, is it your system, Wendy? Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have to be indoors?
Well, no, this year we're going to pull them outdoors. We're just going to put them into a, I went to visit a couple of aquaponic systems. Some of them had them just in IBCs out in the yard. We're going to just put it in a, like a grow shed sort of thing, with, a tarp over the top of the grow shed, things like that. But we'll see how it goes. The shed was good, but it didn't get enough light. And therefore we didn't get enough for our Yeah, we just didn't think it had enough light. So we're going to try it a different area this year. What do you think, Matt? Inside, outside?
It depends on the size of the tank, but I'm always a fan of inside because you've just got less hassles. It's easy to do climate control. You can do pest control. You're not having to worry about rats coming in and nicking all your red claw overnight, which they will do if they get access to it and crawl in. Otherwise, you're just going to find a bunch of dead rats in your IVCs. It just makes it a little bit easier, but it is more costly, right? So it becomes down to the dollars at the end of the day. Otherwise, you can look at ponds and digging things into the ground, which can offer some solutions, but also create a few more problems.
Yeah. And just one a little bit different about the connecting with local industry or community partners. Have you got any suggestions about how they go about that? Are there any peak organisations that the schools could get in touch with? Matt, do you know of any, or Wendy, have you connected with any in your program?
Yeah, so from a commercial perspective, every state should have a peak seafood body. So there'll be one in each of the states. So that might be your first port of call as a teacher. Or as a school, just give them a call and say, hey, listen, who's around, who might be interested. You can just do a quick Google search, honestly, and just find the local farms that might be of interest as well. And obviously, Wendy, you've done that with the Red Claw guys servicing your area. That'd be my first two ports of call. Otherwise, just shoot me an email. I'm more than happy to do some searching for it.
Thanks, Matt. And Wendy, did you connect up with any other? I don't know if there's any.
Like I spoke to Matt before we were doing it and things like that, and not only himself but another couple from Tasmania were very happy to have and willing to get on and have a chat to our kids. Our problem was we ran out of time. The term got away from us, and to cover all of what the kids wanted to cover, they chose what they wanted to learn about with regard to aquaculture at the very beginning. And we matched that. And then we ran out of time. We showed so many videos and they got so excited with all the different aquaculture system styles and how it went. We didn't get to sort of get back to our visitors. So it'd be better to do it. It's just a matter of timing of doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And Alan's got a question about what light requirements do Red Claw have?
Well, for me, I found, I don't think ours was about the heat in the water. We didn't have heaters running last time, Matt. So inside, it never got to their best temperature because they do have a temperature that they like to live in. And if it goes too low of that, they sort of curl up and go to sleep and die. So we would, if we kept it inside this year, we would put heaters in. And taking them outside into the thingy, there'll definitely be heaters in because we're going to have them this year in the middle of winter, which is different because our year 11s and 12s need to be using them in term 3. So that's what, July, August, September.
Yeah. And Matt, any specifics around light requirements for Red Claw that you would like to add?
It's all going to be very, very area dependent. They usually need a little bit of light, more often than not a huge amount. They'll grow pretty well in a fairly shaded area. Similar for yabbies as well. Introducing light introduces a whole bunch of other problems, like around algal growth and other organisms. So more often than not, keeping the lights dim as much as you can is ideal, unless you're specifically growing plants in your system, which obviously need a bit of light for that one, Wendy. So that makes sense. Just one quick one on
see, you need the light for the plants. That's right. That's why I needed the light for the plants.
I don't mix my plants and my fish. But just a very quick one though, you did touch on it around the ethics and handling fish. For schools that are interested, it is worth looking at anesthetics when you're handling fish. There's a food safe one called Aquatic, which is isoeugenol. I'm not too sure on the food safety part of it. I'm pretty sure it is food safe. There's no withholding period for it, but it's a very effective anesthetic, and it is worth exploring it if you're handling any live animals in schools, just to sort of make it a little bit easier to handle your fish and your crayfish as well. It works quite well.
Yeah, brilliant. I've just one last question because I know in the interest of time it's 4:31. What do you feed them?
I did buy them mealworms, but they weren't that excited by them. But I think I bought them dead ones and they weren't that excited and they cost me a fortune. So don't go spending all your money on dead mealworms. That's no go. Apparently they like the live ones, other than that, we have yabby food in the, and I'd like to say that I've had enough time to be teaching the kids to make their own rations, because that's a great learning. But I didn't last term. I literally fed them yabby food. The 11s and 12s will do a feed trial with them though, so they'll be creating their own feed rations.
That's awesome. As in they're going to make up their own diets to feed the yabbies.
Yeah.
Oh, great
But they're
opportunity.
going to do two because they'll have different ponds. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What a great idea.
Excellent. So nothing else to add in terms of food, just the yabby food that you can get commercially. Brilliant.
They like fish flakes as well, but it's just how it goes.
We'll see what the year 11s come up with. Yeah.
See what they come up with.
Red Claw will eat anything. That's fine.
Yeah, they'll eat veggies,
including each other.
They don't mind veggies. Yeah.
Yeah. They'll eat anything.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for everyone for attending today. We really appreciate your insights, Wendy, from a school's perspective, and Matt, your expertise and your experience, sharing your experience. Thank you, everyone, for attending. It's been great. As I said, this information will all be online. We're going to pop it up on our YouTube channel, actually, and we'll send you out a copy of the webinar as well, so you can share it amongst your teaching friends as well. So thank you very much. If you've got any questions or queries, just aged@cqu.edu.au if you wanted to send us any questions, and we can pass them on. So thank you. Appreciate your time, everybody.